Hello, everyone. Jay and Christopher here, and today we'll be discussing the most difficult QB battle yet, maybe ever. Also, why one defensive back's 1 year is enough to make the team, and we try to figure out why Len Rhodes spells his name the way he does. All that more as a Lunch Room Syndicate presents the completely factual, not at all subjective, all-time San Francisco 49ers team.
If this is the first time that you are joining us, welcome. Where have you been and why are you here now? But as we're going through looking at the players, Christopher usually leans a little more heavily on stats, while I tend to look a little more at name recognition as we pick 11 on the offensive side, 11 on the defensive side. For the offensive side, we have one quarterback that we're taking, two halfbacks, three wide receivers, a single tight end, and four from what we call the Alt-O that can be any of the offensive positions. That gives us a chance to look at offensive linemen, kickers, and anybody that may not have made it initially.
Absolutely. We also have 11 that we're choosing on the defensive side of the ball, including two defensive linemen, three linebackers, four defensive backs, and then two others in what we call the alternate D. That's similar to the Alt-O from any position we can choose from. That may include a punter from time to time. I doubt it, but I like to say that, just make them feel a little bit better.
It is a possibility, not a probability.
No, not likely at all.
To help us out, we are going to be tiering off the players. Our tier list is going to be based off of the position for the team. So a player that might be a bottom tier for the 49ers could be a top tier on, say, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So it's really, we're not doing this so much as to say, put a grade on a player, but try to create a gap between the top end players and the players that are recognized on our bottom tier, but really aren't going to make the all-time team, where the middle tier is a little more debatable. Top tier is a definite, they have to be on an all-time team.
Absolutely. And we do that with three colors overall. We have the bottom tier, which is white. Middle tier, what are we going to go with? Red and gold for the top?
Red. Gold for the top.
Yeah, that's what kind of was. Even though I think red's more their primary, I think gold works better as a top. It's gold. But if you're new, again, one of the first things we do is we determine a face of the franchise. And this is the guy with that, for the most part, when you think of this particular team, this is kind of the first name most people think of. With San Francisco, there's probably about four really good choices, right, Jay?
Which is kind of surprising, because this is going to be a team. We are both anticipating a team that's going to be battling for like the best ever spot. But really, it comes down to like four names when we're talking face of the franchise. We have on the defensive side, Ronnie Lott. That's probably the only defensive name that I put on there. Great players. The only one that I really would say face of the franchise. On the offensive side, we have our QB battle of Montana and Young, and wide receiver, of course, Jerry fucking Rice.
Yes. Again, four really good names. And even with that said, even with the QBs, even with Ronnie Lott, I'm going to just come out and say it. For me, it's Jerry Rice. When you have somebody who you can put into a conversation of Wayne Gretzky-esque when it comes to wide receiver records, this is a guy that you need to take seriously. He did all these records mainly with San Francisco, and then he went at like 38 and still put up 1,000-yard seasons in Oakland. He got 12 Pro Bowls, 10 first-team All-Pros, 1,200 receptions. Montana and Young are close, but Jerry Rice is the face of the franchise.
And not just that, Ronnie Lott is one of the top safeties, but he's not such a standout amongst the rest of the pack of the best safeties of all time. Quarterbacks, Montana and Young are both easily top 10 quarterbacks. Would probably both argue for they're both in the top 5 of all-time quarterbacks, but they don't separate themselves from the rest of the pack. There's Jerry Rice, and then there's whoever you want to argue for second, but they're not close. They're a mile behind. Yes, Jerry Rice is the face of the San Francisco 49ers. But our first position is quarterback, where we are going to be taking a look at John Brody, Jeff Garcia, Joe Montana, Alex Smith, Y.A. Tittle, and Steve Young. And we have some gaps that we are going to be putting in here. So starting off with John Brody, they're spanning 3 decades. He has a first team All-Pro, 2 Pro Bowls, over 30,000 yards back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is huge. He also has more interceptions than touchdowns, and there's a gap that we need to speak of. He's bottom tier.
Again, look, as we mentioned before, for other teams, this is a borderline top tier to mid tier for a lot of other teams, but for San Francisco, I'm not sure how much we're going to have in that middle tier, but John Brody does not quite make it because of the interceptions. But next up on our list is Jeff Garcia, a guy that I think we both really liked. He started his career extremely late in the NFL at 29 years old. Something that I kind of forgot about. Only started for about 5 years. Seemed like a longer time than that. Was really, really competent, replacing the injured Steve Young in '99. That ended up being a career ender for him. But unfortunately, just kind of similar to John Brody in this. I like his stats, but he's a bottom tier.
Bottom tier for him. Again, that one's a little more difficult because again, we both really like
yes.
Jeff Garcia. But again, we have to create the gap because up at the top, we have a guy named Joe Montana. A few of our viewers may have heard of Joe Montana before, probably not a lot, but a couple may have. Yeah, for the longest time, he was considered like the best quarterback, and he started off just a ridiculous string of quarterbacks for the San Francisco 49ers on, man, how are you going to find a guy to replace that? And then later we'll find out, well, they did. But Joe Montana is a top tier gold.
Next up is another guy that we were both fans of. Had a rough start to his career because at that point San Francisco was pretty brutal. Alex Smith, the number 1 overall pick, really came on strong after about 4 or 5 years. And unfortunately, it's a bottom tier for this team because of those very same reasons we talked about before. But he ended up having a really good career. But as was happenstance for him, he got replaced by another guy we'll talk about later on, then got replaced again in Kansas City by another guy. It happens, but he is a bottom tier, unfortunately, for this team.
Yeah, that one's even harder than Jeff Garcia. I really liked Alex Smith. Part of the reason why I feel like I want to bump him up is because he got a lot of heat in San Francisco, and I don't think it was deserved at all.
It wasn't, but you have to understand part of the reason why he got it. And part of the reason I think that's what happened was, and it wasn't his fault.
No, they hit the entire team hit a wall.
Oh yeah. I mean, they've been bad for years up to that point anyway. After Jeff Garcia left, basically, or towards the tail end of Jeff Garcia. But the problem was, who else was drafted that very same year?
Who was it?
Aaron Rodgers.
Oh,
there was debate between who the 49ers were going to take, Alex Smith or Aaron Rodgers. Most fans and media and everything else assumed they were going to take Aaron Rodgers. He's from the area. He wanted to play for the Niners, grew up a Niners fan. Then they took Alex Smith, surprisingly. Then Alex Smith struggled in the initial, and then Aaron Rodgers didn't play for a few years. Then he came out, I was like, oh my God, look how good Aaron Rodgers is. It was Alex Smith, a lot of his own, out of his control, but that's some of the reasons why he got so much shit in San Fran.
Next name on here is Y.A. Tittle, a Hall of Famer, somebody that we're looking at going, man, I can't believe this guy is not going to make the team from 51 to 60 he played. Again, more interceptions than touchdowns. I threw John Brody under the bus for it and given Y.A. Tittle a pass. Is that justified? I don't know. You tell me down in the comments, but he's a red tier.
Yeah, I'll tell you right now, it's justified. Part of that is, first of all, he has that name recognition of a guy, of a big name guy in NFL history. That in of itself, we talked about it, name recognition matters for us. So when you have a guy that has that much name recognition from that era, for guys that weren't even close to being around, that's important. And he kind of brought, he kind of was part of the evolution of the modern NFL offense in terms of just the forward pass in general. It's still a fairly unusual thing when he started, and he helped bring that along more. So he's a red tier. And finally, Steve Young, the man who replaced Joe Montana, an all-time great. Somehow, our last team we did, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, are like, oh, we don't want this guy. San Francisco's like, we'll take him. Played almost as long, which actually surprised me a little bit. And he's a clear-cut gold tier, which means we have, as I alluded to in the opener, one of the toughest QB decisions. And I don't think we're going to agree on it.
Well, we're going to agree as long as you go with the correct choice of Steve Young. Steve Young, whose arm, not quite as good as Joe Montana. I'll give you that. But it wasn't that far behind. And the guy had wheels.
He was
one of the earlier mobile quarterbacks to come through and be a dual threat, and was fantastic at both sides of it. His yardage, when you combine his passing yards and his rushing yards, is going to be tops.
It's some solid points with Steve Young there. He was a very mobile quarterback, which is something that, although Montana was a mobile in the pocket QB, he wasn't necessarily a statue that you see, especially back in that era. He still was somebody that you weren't going to get a lot of running from him. But Joe Montana and the West Coast offense revolutionized the sport completely. The modern offenses today are based around what Joe Montana and the Niners did back then. They won 4 Super Bowls. They were the dominant team of the 80s that included the Chicago Bears of the 80s, the New York Giants of the 80s, who were really good, the Washington football team of the 80s, who were really good. This was not a bad era for the NFC, and San Francisco won 4 Super Bowls, more than anyone else of the decade, because of Joe Montana. Joe Montana, 244 touchdowns, 123 interceptions, a little bit more than, obviously, Steve Young. Steve Young was a little bit more accurate. But Joe Montana revolutionized the position, and Joe Montana kept Steve Young on the bench for many, many years, all the way up until 1991, effectively. I think 92 he was injured. So for 4 years, Joe Montana was the reason why Steve Young didn't even start for 4 years in San Francisco, because he was just so damn good.
Well, Steve Young's the reason they were able to do away with Montana and get rid of him.
They did, but he didn't have as much team success. That's not all on Steve Young. Obviously, they only had 1 Super Bowl victory. They were still very competitive. It's still top team in the league. But Joe Montana is, both of these guys are probably top 5 all time, realistically. It's splitting hairs a bit, but
I think the big difference between our arguments is Joe Montana is going to be the first name most people think of with quarterback. Steve Young had more skill at the quarterback position. I'm taking skill.
I'm taking evolution of the game. Joe Montana, again,
we talked about that with Steve Young. How did he not revolutionize?
He did revolutionize to some extent, but I don't think to the level that Joe Montana revolutionized the game with the West Coast offense. In the NFL history, you have up and downs in offenses, but the West Coast is something that has been staying consistent since Joe Montana has came in the league with Bill Walsh and Joe Montana. He perfected offense. He perfected the quarterback play. Quarterbacks modeled their games after Joe Montana. Yes, mobile quarterbacks more Steve Young, and we are going to a more mobile game now, but For me, and it's not by a lot, and I don't mean to shit on Steve Montana.
Who? That's a player.
Yeah, that would be good. And they both have the same amount of Pro Bowls. They both have the same amount of first team All Pros. And either one of them is a good choice. And I got a feeling, no matter what, they're going to make this team. But we have to pick one quarterback. For me, it's Joe Montana.
We have been arguing this for as long as we have known each other. We are never going to settle this argument.
No.
We don't have new arguments that we haven't put forth, that we haven't been arguing for almost 2 decades. We've known each other. We both have them ranked. If we were going to rank a top 5, like I would think Joe Montana's probably at like 2, and then Steve Young would be at 3, and for me it would be Steve Young at 2 and Joe Montana at 3. They follow each other. Their play styles are interchangeable, but in terms of which quarterback are we going with, it's interchangeable. We're not going to convince each other. We got to shoot for it.
We gotta shoot. And if you're new to the Lunch Room Syndicate, every now and then, we don't do this often. It happens every couple vids now. I haven't done it in a while. We shoot. We do 1, 2, 3. We pick an odd. One of us picks an odd. One of us picks an even. We either put 1 or 2 fingers up, and the person, and whatever our cumulative total is, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 or 4. I'm trying to explain a little bit what we're doing. Not
I know
well.
you are. This is fantastic. I'm hoping you try to edit that together and you listen back to this a few times and you're like, shit, what did I do?
I'm probably just going to delete this out completely. All right. But let's shoot. Here we go. Ready?
Okay, I will take evens.
Evens. All right.
1, 2, 3, shoot. Damn.
1-0.
1, 2, 3, shoot. Damn.
2-0.
1, 2, 3, shoot.
2-1.
1, 2, 3, shoot. You got it.
Joe Clutch. Joe Cool.
Well, Joe Montana's going up. Steve Young is going over into the Alt-O.
Just do yourself a favor. Just put him in that first spot. I mean, he's not. Why even dick around with that?
Okay, so our quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers is Joe Montana.
But we are moving on to the running back position. Jay, who do we have that we're selecting from?
We have Roger Craig, Frank Gore, Garrison Hurst, Hugh McElhaney, Joe Perry, Ricky Waters, and Ken Willard.
All right. So Roger Craig, a bit undervalued in the modern day in terms of value to the 80s Niners team, but was a really good running back for them for many years. Over 1,100 total yards. One of the first that was really a great receiving back out of the backfield for them. 66 touchdowns. For me, he's a gold tier.
Okay, for some reason, I thought you were going to be hedging from that gold. I was going to have to overrule you on that one. Frank Gore, real powerful back over there. 11,000 yards in under 150 games is massive. We have another gold tier.
Garrison Hurst is on here. He was a very good running back during his time, but he's more on here for his amazing comeback story after an injury that swiped away 2 years. It looked like it's going to end his career entirely. It was a nasty leg injury. It's something you just don't see. I don't remember exactly what it was called. I did the research. I can't remember now, but it was nasty. Almost lost his leg, I think, at one point. He is a bottom tier, but his story is just really cool.
Hugh McElhaney, a Hall of Famer with 5 Pro Bowls and 2 first teams. And it's not too often that we have Hall of Famers like that are going to go mid-tier, but that's where I'm at with him.
Yeah, it's a mid-tier guy, unfortunately. This is where the name recognition for this older guys comes to kind of harm them, unfortunately, for us, because we just don't really know these guys that well. But yeah, mid-tier is not bad, though. Speaking of Hall of Famers, though, Joe Perry, man, this guy is from an older day, one of the first stars of the Niners. history. I don't know what is going on with that face mask thing. That is a very
No, I'm looking at that. It's like curved up, or is that a mustache?
no, that is part of the helmet. It is. I couldn't get a clearer picture than that because this guy played in the 50s. But his stats are really good for his era. 158 games played in a 13-year stretch.
Those stats are good for today's era. What are you talking about?
He's a gold tier for me.
Ricky Waters, just not enough time in San Francisco. He's an all-time eventually, but not here, bottom tier.
Yeah. One of the weird guys, I always think of him as a Niner, but he only spent 3 years there. So
and 3 Pro Bowls.
And 3. Oh, he was really good. He was really good. For over 4,000 yards in those 3 seasons total. And finally, we have Ken Willard, who was the late 60s, early 70s, 4-time Pro Bowler, 61 touchdowns, over 8,000 total yards. Not compared to our other gold, I don't think he reaches that, but I would put him at mid-tier.
Yeah, I think he's much more comparable to Hugh than Joe.
Yep.
He's behind Hugh anyway, but
yeah.
So we have 3 players, 2 selections, and it's going to be a tough one to put who we're going to take out.
This is pretty hard. I mean, ultimately, all 3's stats in terms of yards and touchdowns are fairly close. I mean, Roger Craig drops a bit in TDs, but he played in a good area. But he also has way more receptions than the other 2. Joe Perry did his numbers in an era where maybe that numbers wasn't as prevalent. And Frank Gore was just an absolute beast of a running back. But the thing with like Frank Gore, though, and I think it's unfortunate because this is a guy that has 16,000 yards in his career. Even, by the way, that's like not just rounding it, completely even. 11,000 with him, but he's kind of overlooked a lot. You never really thought of him as one of the best backs in the league at times. Every now and then he'd pop up in the discussion, but he often was overshadowed throughout his career. He played from 2005 to 2014, so a lot of that was, overshadowed by people like Damian Tomlinson and stuff like that. So it's tough to where do you put these guys? Roger Craig played on an offense that was legendary. How much does that account for because of that versus how good Roger Craig actually was?
I have my 2 names whenever you're ready, and I have my order for them.
As much as I want to I would probably go Craig and Gore.
Okay, I was at Craig and Perry,
and
but we agree that Roger Craig is 1.
I think I want to put Perry at 2 because too often we undervalue guys from that era, and I don't like doing that. And I Frank Gore is absolutely deserving to be on this list just as much, but I think we undervalue guys from that era.
Way back, we're going to a much different era, and his yards are not that much further behind Frank Gore. He has a touchdown lead on him, and he has 2 first time. So our wide receiving core for the 49ers are Roger Craig and Joe Perry. That takes us to the wide receivers where we're looking at Alan Beals, Dwight Clark, Terrell Owens, Jerry Rice, Freddie Solomon, John Taylor, Gene Washington, and Billy Wilson.
Alan Beals he started with the Niners in their first season in 1946. Those numbers don't look that great in comparison, but you have to understand the era he played in. Fortunately, I can't pull him too high, though. I'd still probably pull him at bottom tier, but well worth the recognition there. 49 TDs in 77 games in the 40s. It's a pretty good player.
Yeah, I have to bump him up to at least a red tier because he's one of the earlier ones to even fucking catch a goddamn ball.
I mean, you know what? That's fair. You're not wrong.
Like, I was almost considering gold tier for him, so he's got to go.
How you doing, Jet? You just in the way? Yeah, you're just in the way.
Dwight Clark with the catch of catches. 506 receptions for 6,750 yards, which is good, not great. I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between his stats versus that one catch and where I
Mhm.
put him. I think I'm at an upper end. I don't think he's quite a top tier for me, but
Mhm.
real damn close.
Yeah, I would put he was a really good wide receiver for many years, and most of a lot of his years were pre Jerry Rice, so we have to understand that. But obviously, he's known for one of the most famous catches in NFL history, up there with the helmet catch, the San Antonio Holmes catch of the Super Bowl. What was it, 46, 7? Oh, wait, 43. I'm sorry. This is one of the best catches ever. And it looked like Joe Montana was throwing the ball away. And Dwight Clark just was like, I mean, look how far, it's hard to see that picture, but if you look up that play, you see he is like 3 feet off the ground to catch that ball. I'm pretty sure Joe Montana was just throwing that way. Terrell Owens, we've talked about him before. Four-time pro Dallas.
Oh,
This is where he made his name. He at times overshadowed in terms of stats. Oh, aging, admittedly, Jerry Rice. Terrell Owens is a locker room cancer. I'm going to get that out of the way now. But in terms of skill, he's top 5 all time. This is a gold tier for me, even with kind of his outside shit. Because I'll tell you, even with this bullshit he does, he is still he's produced everywhere he's wanted. This ain't a Randy Moss situation where I was like, maybe I will, maybe I won't.
so his cancer in the locker room, that's a cancer in the locker room. Is that a cancer off the field to where he's going around doing like really fucking horrible shit, or just not even really, just bad shit?
No, he just was
Nothing that I've heard about.
No, he's just a bad
asshole.
Yeah, he's an egotistical asshole.
Yeah, so we haven't disqualified anybody for being an asshole.
No, but like his is so highly,
Yeah, no, I'm saying I agree with your hearing. Jerry Rice, we already mentioned, he's the face of the franchise. He's the greatest wide receiver ever. There's not anything more to say than GOAT. So bottom tier and move on.
Yeah, exactly. Bottom tier. I gotta get kickball on my way because I can't see the screen. Sorry, yet. Next up, Freddie Solomon, an often overlooked guy in San Francisco in the early era. He didn't really play with Jerry Rice, but he was overlooked by Dwight Clark a bit. Put up some solid numbers. Unfortunately, with this team, I can't really put him above a bottom tier, but he is worth mentioning though.
John Taylor's pretty much the same thing that you mentioned, with slotting some different names on your comparison, who he's overshadowed by. Damn good wide receiver, but he's going to stay a bottom tier for me.
Gene Washington, guy that I had forgotten about in terms of played for the 49ers for a while because of their just wide receiver history, but played and it was pre their Super Bowl era, but damn good wide receiver in his time. 4-time Pro Bowl, 3-time first team All Pro. He's 6,600 yards on only 371 catches. That's damn good. I'm torn here because I want to put him gold, but I don't think he's in that same level as the other two. So I'm like, he's like on the line for me.
Well, I disagree. I think he is.
You think he's put gold? I'm trying
to. I think he's right there with Terrell. Of course, nobody's in the league. We mentioned that nobody's in the league with Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
But he's not a step behind anyone other than Jerry Rice. He might be my number 2 pick over here, and that's even taking a look at Billy Wilson, who was earlier than Gene Washington yet, and still almost 6,000 yards receiving in the 50s. He's another gold tier.
Yep. I love that picture because that is not the way you catch a football. I love that picture, but Billy Wilson was really good at the back of his day. Again, era that necessarily.
What he's doing, he's looking at the off the backboard in the net catch.
Oh yes, that's exactly what he's doing.
That's how you want to catch a football, not with your hands, bam, and then wrap your arms around it the proper way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's teach the kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep your hands away from the ball.
Yeah, that just All right, we do have 4 gold tiers, which means one person's got to be left off, but one person that isn't going to get left off is obviously our number 1 spot, which is Freddie Solomon.
Oh, I clicked on the wrong one. I'm sorry.
You clicked on that bum Jerry Rice.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right, so we do
Too late.
differ. So it sounds like you and I have 2 and 3 about the same because I kind of lean toward Gene Washington over Billy Wilson. So probably our top 3 is
Well,
Gene.
and no, your number 2 is Owens, I'm guessing. My number
Yes.
2 is Gene Washington. My number 3 is Owens, and I would hope that your number 3 is Gene Washington.
Yes,
Which
that's what.
puts Billy Wilson behind. Sorry, you're going to have to settle for the Alt-O position.
That's where I was kind of going with that in terms of our top 3. I think our top 3 is the same, but I think our order is slightly different.
Yeah, Terrell Owens obviously has the stats, but it's in a much different era.
I'm going to make one. I do enjoy defending Terrell Owens to some degree because a lot of people just shit on Terrell Owens. Like, no, this dude is like fucking good. Yeah, he was an idiot, but here's what I'll kind of say about Terrell Owens. He can't. Now, Grant, Jerry, I want to preference this with Jerry Rice was already in his late 30s by the time he left San Francisco. He went to Oakland, had like 2 or 3 more 1,000-yard receivers. So he wasn't done. But Terrell Owens, his come up was the reason why San Francisco felt it okay to let go of Jerry Rice.
Okay, but you can't say that for there and then defend Montana. I tried using that argument for you.
No, but I'm not using the argument of why Terrell Owens is better than Jerry Rice, though, where you were doing it. And Jerry Rice is, I'm using it as Gene Washington, surprisingly not a Hall of Famer. That one surprised me a little bit. I'm not going to put that against him because I think that's wrong. I think he should be a Hall of Famer. Not obviously that's catches again. A little bit of a different era he played in. He didn't play with Montana, obviously. For me, it's Terrell Owens. I put him in the top 5 all time, and I don't put Gene Washington really anywhere near there. I never think of him as a top 5 guy.
Again, I think that it has to be fairly large with the era that they were playing in. They weren't as pass heavy, anywhere near as pass heavy as they are now with Terrell Owens. You look at the yards per catch and it's Gene Washington. Skill wise,
I will disagree if you say it's Gene Washington. I will disagree heavily.
I'm giving it to Owens. I'm giving you the skill to Owens. But we talked about the locker room cancer. I've never heard anybody call Gene Williams.
Yeah, and that's kind of where.
And I'm saying that to bash Terrell Owens, already conceding he's in a top 3. I'm not trying to knock him out.
I understand that, and that's kind of where my argument, I won't say falls apart, but there's a part of me that wants to, as much as I defend Terrell Owens, I can't. He did ruin the Niners. He kind of ruined Philly. He kind of ruined Dallas. There is something to that, and there is a part of me that wants to knock that a bit. And it's like so for that reason, it's probably Gene Washington, but this feels a bit. I'm just wondering in my mind, I'm like, is a gap close enough to warrant that?
Well, I don't think that there's as big of a gap in receiving ability as there is in not being a jackass. Wide receiving core for our 49ers, Jerry Rice, Gene Washington, Terrell Owens. Off to the tight end positions, we only get one between Vernon Davis and George Kittle, but we're also going to bring up Brent Jones and Ted Quillick.
This is a pretty, for compared to what we normally get here in the tight end side, this is a
solid decision.
Yeah, we actually have a legitimate decision. First and foremost, how do we taught this? So when we're going to do these tiers, we're going to probably put Vernon and George as gold tiers for this position, right? Again, that doesn't mean we think Vernon and George are on the same level as some of the other gold tiers. We obviously don't. George Kittle might eventually, but Brent Jones would probably be a mid-tier, and then Ted Quillick is probably a bit behind that. But today's decision is Vernon Davis and George Kittle.
Okay, well, you already tiered off everyone, and I don't disagree with your tier picks here.
I know normally we go player to player, but when it's a relatively small amount like this, I think we can get away with doing this, especially when we know it's a debate either way.
Okay, so this is where the difference between Vernon Davis and George Kittle comes down to me. Is Vernon Davis right now has the better stats, but he played a much longer time. And that's not because George Kittle didn't play a long time. It's because he is still playing.
He's still playing.
He is going to take over those stats in a smaller amount of time. Kittle's at even a different level than Vernon Davis. So I know he's not there yet. But
Yeah.
he's just a different level.
And the other day we were talking about it, and I was more strong on Vernon Davis now at the time. I've relented on that a bit, because one thing outside of the touchdown to gain ratio, I think they're about equal on. One thing I forgot.
Yeah, Vernon Davis does have, if we extrapolate for games played, Vernon Davis will still have a touchdown advantage over Kittle.
But there are a couple things that, first off, George Kittle has a first team All-Pro. And when you consider some of the tight ends that he got that over in today's game, when you're talking Travis Kelce's, we don't particularly like him, but Rob Gronkowski's of the world and stuff like that. There's a few other, Darren Waller. I think not quite Darren Waller at that point when he got it. Maybe, I can't remember. My timing's a little off. And probably the reason why I kind of switch a little bit towards more of your argument with George Kittle is he set in his second or third year the all-time single season yard record for tight end for receiving. That got broken in the year because of Travis Kelce, but the fact that he had it to begin with. So I think I've changed myself to George Kittle as well.
Okay, awesome. We do have quite a few names over here for the Alt-O. We're going to be looking at tight end, wide receiver, halfback, 2 quarterbacks, and some offensive linemen.
And kick return.
So the names that we are going to be considering: Harris Barden, Forrest Blue, Colin Kaepernick, Randy Cross, Mike Iapudi, Iupudi.
This is the first time that I get to watch
Patty.
Iupati.
Len Rohidi. Man, it would normally be like road, but he can't, but it's spelled differently.
It's spelled
Rohadi. Len Rohadi. Jesse Sapolu, Joe Staley, Bob St. Clair, Steve Wallace, Abe Woodson, and then coming over from the other positions of Steve Young, Frank Gore, Billy Wilson, and Vernon Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Harris, the first name on here. It's got a couple first team All-Pros, which is good, but I got a gap to establish. I'm going to put him at a mid-tier.
Forrest Blue does not have the games played, but he is a 4-time Pro Bowler, 2-time first-team All-Pro. We talk about the gap and only 96 games played. I'm hedging between the two, top and mid tiers.
I think he's their best offensive lineman. So wherever you want to put the tier based off of that comment, I'm okay with.
Probably top tier then.
Colin Kaepernick, not over on the quarterback side, but on the Alt-O, because we like to appreciate more than just strictly the sport. Colin Kaepernick was a tremendous quarterback. He had a long career ahead of him, and he sacrificed it for his beliefs. We have gotten into many arguments with many people, all starting up and kind of centering around Colin Kaepernick, who started all this in the NFL. We are both huge supporters. He is absolutely a gold tier.
Randy Cross, it's tough to follow Colin Kaepernick, admittedly. Randy Cross, probably the biggest name in terms of linemen to come out of the 80s dynasty. I'm not the hugest fan of him, so I kind of put him on the low tier. I know some people have him a lot higher. I don't particularly like the guy, so that's part of the problem for me. But I mean, he's probably a mid-tier guy realistically.
Okay, well, I'm at a low tier next for Mike there. 75 games, just not enough, and it's all right.
Yeah, he ended up changing teams, had a couple more Pro Bowls, had a really good career ahead of him. Ended up suffering some lot of injuries, but he despite the limited amount of games played, he's actually a really good offensive lineman in his career, but just not a lot of time. All right, when you pronounce it, Rohde. Yes, that is this. I think it's Road. 208 games played, so he played a long time, but only one Pro Bowl. Obviously, well before the dynasty started, so maybe a bit overlooked. But 208 games makes me want to put him in the mid tier, but
I'd be okay with mid tier if he
Mid-tier.
spelled his name correctly. RHODE, he's a mid tier. ROHDE, he's bottom tier.
okay, fair enough.
Jesse is the next name on here. 182 games again is a lot. 2 Pro Bowls during that span. He's kind of borderline between a bottom tier and a mid tier for me. I'm going to keep him at a bottom tier.
Okay. Joe Staley played for 181 games, 6-time Pro Bowler. I think about the only other lineman that I feel comfortable that we've done so far putting at top tier, one of the best lineman tackles in the sport for many years, not named Joe Thomas, because Joe Thomas was, I think, identical in career for it's the same length of time and everything. They have a weird but yeah, he's a gold tier future Hall of Famer.
Bob St. Clair is a current Hall of Famer playing from 53 to 63 with 5 Pro Bowls. Not somebody that I'm overly familiar with, so I'm going to go mid tier.
Yeah, mid tier is fine. I don't know what that helmet is, but
it looks like it's pushed back.
Yeah,
but then not.
But it gets weirder. Steve Wallace, who apparently is a big fan of Spaceballs.
His is pushed forward.
That is like a secondary. That's like a second helmet on top of a helmet. If you look up a full-size picture, it is look up Steve Wallace. Yeah. It is. I remember him well. It's one reason why I remember him well, because I remember he was like the only guy in the league that had that helmet. Like, what is this helmet? Like, I appreciate head protection. I'm guessing it didn't work because it didn't become a thing, but maybe because aesthetically it's horrible. But he was actually a really good lineman as well for 11 years, 166 games played. That also shows you kind of the difference in the eras between Bob and Steve Wallace. Steve, 166, Bob, 118. Same amount of years played. But I wouldn't put him, honestly, he's more just a bottom tier in this group, but was a good lineman for many years for the dynasty teams.
Abe Woodson. Look at that, just shy of 30 yards per return. Are you insane, man? Has 5 Pro Bowls, 2 first team. He's a gold tier. And then our ranking based off of positions for Young, Gore, Wilson, and Davis, I would keep with this group. None of them are changing for me. I think they're all still gold tier consideration. So now we need who we're taking. We have 4 selections. 5, 6. We have 8 players, so half of them are being cut. Who I'm putting up for number 1 though is Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit ago. When we make all-time teams, we've done it before, where off the field stuff matters, both good and bad, and obviously Colin on the good side. We put Chris Cluley as the top alt D on the Minnesota Vikings, not because he was some amazing punter, but because of his outspokenness for the LGBT community in general. And it's the same with Colin Kaepernick. That shit goes a long way.
Yeah, Colin Kaepernick, so close to, I mean, face of the franchise, I really want to focus more on their on-field contribution, things that actually surround the sport. So I didn't bring up Colin Kaepernick's name, but man, massive amount of respect from both of us. Love Colin Kaepernick. He's my first pick.
Yep.
Other than that, we have some players to look at. I still have an easy number 2, though.
Oh, yeah. Steve Young is an easy number 2.
Now, who are we going at? Now we're into an actual decisions that we have to make. I'm kind of at an all-skill, all-O.
I'm kind of leaning that as well, because my third is to me, fairly easy. I think Frank Gore, his stats and just his numbers alone would be in the running for most teams' running backs. Obviously, this team had two really great ones in themselves. He's my third.
See, I was at Vernon Davis for 3 and Frank Gore for 4.
Mhm. I hadn't determined my fourth yet. It was between him, Wilson, and the only potential offensive lineman, Joe Staley, is in that running as well for me.
I think after to tell you where Joe Staley is at, Vernon Davis was my 3, Gore was 4, Abe Wilson was 5, Billy Wilson was 6.
Yeah, I forgot about Abe Woodson too. I mean, he has a strong
And
case.
then I get to an offensive lineman, and I go Forrest Blue before Joe Staley.
You go Forrest Blue before Joe Staley.
So when you're with your consideration, keep in mind Joe Staley is my last.
Yeah, so he's probably out of this running for sure then, which is fair and completely understandable. I would lean towards Davis over Wilson. There's a part of me that wants to put Woodson on there for his amazing returns, but I don't know if I can justify that over Vernon Davis or Billy Wilson. So I think Davis would be my fourth currently.
Okay. He was my 3, so all we did on there is switch back and forth between Gore and Davis. Alt O position, we have Colin Kaepernick, Steve Young, Frank Gore, Vernon Davis. We have a hell of an offense.
But now we move over to the defensive side. We are on the defensive lineman, and we are going to be choosing 2 from the following 7. And we got Dwayne Board, Fred Dean, Chris Dolman, Cedric Hardman, Charlie Kruger, Justin Smith, and Bryant Young. Dwayne Board, 117 games, 61 sacks, solid defensive lineman. No Pro Bowls or anything though, so it's hard to put him anything else other than a bottom tier.
Fred Dean is the next name on here. Fewer games, which means fewer sacks, but his sacks per game was higher. But a much shorter stint in San Francisco. I'm going to go mid-tier. No, he's in the Hall of Fame just because it's 4 years. It's hard for me to look at, and maybe it's just because the names that we've been looking at and the names that are coming up, it's just not long enough for me to go higher than mid.
And I'm going to say something that might be controversial. But looking up his entire career, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I don't normally say that kind of thing, but I want to make that clear because oftentimes you see the HOF, oh, this is a great player. Like, I think compared to some other guys that's in the Hall of Fame, and some guys that aren't even in the Hall of Fame, a guy like we're going to be talking about soon. I hate to say it, but I'm going to be honest about that. Like he was bordering on bottom tier for me, but his Hall of Fame stats probably gets him in the mid tier.
He's got the first team All-Pro.
He does have a first team All-Pro. Next up is Chris Dolman, a Hall of Famer in his own right. Only played 3 seasons. Why I don't necessarily have that on there. He's more known for his Viking days, but he absolutely was still a beast towards his end of his career with the Niners. 48 games played, 38 sacks, but just not enough really there to put him above the bottom tier for me. I like Chris Dolman.
I was almost considering mid-tier because he's damn fucking good.
Yeah, damn good.
Next, we have Cedric Erection. He's hard, man.
You're not wrong.
139 games, 108 sacks. That's a lot. 2 Pro Bowls during that. He's a mid-tier for me.
Charlie Kruger, he had 198 games played a long time. That pitcher, he basically was playing with one eye in that game. Like, yeah, nasty cut. He looked like a boxer. So he was a hard-nosed motherfucker. 54 plus sacks. There's probably not going to be much higher because there's only 1 year that they really didn't be able to count for in 1959. He's a mid-tier guy for me.
Oh, mid-tier. Okay.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking a top tier for somebody whose sacks are well behind what we've been talking about. So you're like, well, how are you putting him in a top tier? Because Justin Smith is that damn good. in 110 games. He's a gold tier for me.
He is a gold tier, often overlooked in the Cincinnati days. And he was very much appreciated in his Niner days, which kind of shows you why Pro Bowls sometimes don't necessarily matter as much as first team All Pros. But even then, he was often overlooked for that too. He had the same amount of sacks he did in Cincinnati, almost the same amount of games played. Some of the things in a great locker room leader. I remember when he retired, how sad like a lot of Niners on the team were at the time. Yeah, easy gold tier. And speaking of easy gold tier, Bryant Young. I remember his disruptive ass back when he played, and he was a beast in the middle. You could clearly see how much he's respected with I think that's his final game. 208 games, 89.4 sacks, apparently. I don't know how he got 4/10 of a sack, but he did. That's how great he was. He got 4/10 of a sack. 4 Pro Bowls, for one first team All Pro, just an absolute disruptor in the middle of that defensive line for a number of years.
Yeah, I have a hard time picking which one's going to go 1 and which one's going to go 2, because we're taking 2, we have to, so job done there. Who we put in net 1, who we put in net 2. I think I'm at Smith Young.
Yeah, I'm opposite. I'm at Young Smith.
If you think the other, I don't have a strong case. Okay, so our defensive lineup: Bryant Young and Justin Smith. Then linebackers, who are we looking at?
We have Navarro Bowman, Ahmad Brooks, Charles Haley, Matt Hazeltine, Ken Norton Jr., Keena Turner, the cousin of Tina Turner. That's probably not true. Dave Wilcox, and Patrick Willis.
What do you got on Bowman?
Navarro Bowman, 8 years in the league, 3-time Pro Bowl, 4-time first team All Pro. You don't have some of the counting stats that you would normally see with guys, but he was the leader of the Niners early 2010s defense. He is a top tier for me.
Ahmed Brooks, really good linebacker there for 120 games. Over 50 sacks from the linebacker position is damn good. I'm going to go mid-tier for him.
Next up is Charles Haley, Hall of Famer. We talked about him with the Cowboys as well. Had a double stint here with the Niners, 3 times Pro Bowl, 1-time first team All Pro. I'm going to be honest with you, 66.5 sacks is really good from the linebacker position as well. I do feel like he's a bit overrated in NFL lore just because he had the 5 total rings, and he was the first one to do it. So he's a mid-tier guy for me, but he's a damn good one.
Well, yeah, but he's got 5 rings, so I have to go top tier.
That's fair. I mean, I can't really argue that.
Matt Hazeltine, Hazel something or other.
More Hazeltine,
for
please.
me. I don't know the name, and when we're looking back that early, if I don't know the name, it's hard for me to go anything above the bottom tier.
Ken Norton Jr. This is a huge name recognition guy. 2-time Pro Bowler, 1-time first team All Pro, 112 games played with the Niners, 4 picks, only 5.5 sacks. Again, kind of similar to Navarro Bowman in the not going to have a ton of counting stats, and they didn't have really good tackling stats even in the 90s. I struggle though with him of my biases versus where he's actually at. So he's kind of in that bordering mid and top tier.
When I just go through and look at just the names, I'd have his name as the second best linebacker in this group. And you doubted yourself, but this is in fact Tina Turner's cousin.
I don't know if you're being serious or not.
Of course I'm being serious. That's how you know they're related. Keena and Tina. If their names rhyme, they're cousins.
It's true. That's usually how things work, isn't it?
153 games with 11 interceptions and 22 sacks, 1 Pro Bowl. The tenure almost wants me to bump him up a little bit, but he's still a bottom tier for me.
As of now, our only Hall of Famer on this list, Dave Wilcox, 7-time Pro Bowl.
Charles Haley.
Oh, I forgot about Charles. Our second Hall of Famer on this list, Dave Wilcox, played for 11 years, pre-dynasty, 7-time Pro Bowler, 2-time first team All-Pro. More equal to games to old Keena there, but a lot better stats. He's a gold tier for me.
And Patrick Willis is the best linebacker in San Francisco 49er history. Period. No questions. Gold tier.
Yep. One of the best. I have no problem saying this in terms of all around gameplay, because he wasn't a rush to passer type, but he still had 20.5 sacks. In terms of all around gameplay, one of the top linebackers to ever play the game in terms of what you think of a traditional linebacker. Even like an LT is more of a, you think of more of a edge rusher, but Patrick Willis was an absolute beast as a backer. Number one spot.
He's number one. Now I struggle with two because, again, name recognition. I have Ken Norton. Looking at him, I'm probably more okay with Dave Wilcox, but then we run into the problems of Haley or Ken Norton. So that's where I'm at. I don't know where you're at. And I'm just leaving out Navarro Bowman. He was more borderline, top tier, mid tier.
Yeah.
The other ones are,
it's
top tier.
Exactly. I think if Navarro Bowman's games and tenure was longer, I could make a stronger case because I thought he was really good when he played. But I agree. I think it's down to those three. I'm with you. I think Dave Wilcox is 2 in terms of overall, not including name. And you kind of heard my argument with Charles Haley. I think he's a bit valued. I kind of hate the word overrated now, so I'm trying to use different terminology. Because he is a Hall of Famer. He has 5 rings. That is a lot. Ken Norton has only 1. But he was so good at times. I think realistically, it's probably Charles at 3.
So the linebacking core for the San Francisco 49ers, Patrick Willis, Dave Wilcox, and Charles Haley. Off to the defensive backs. Who are we looking at?
We have Kermit Alexander, Morton the Neck Hanks, Dwight Hicks, Jimmy Johnson, Ronnie Lott, and Deion Sanders.
What do you got on Kermit?
Oh, Kermit the Frog here. Kermit Alexander, 7 years in the Bay in the mid to late 60s. One-time Pro Bowler, only 94 games, but 36 interceptions in those. I struggle with him because I don't know the name. I didn't know the name coming into it. A lot of picks, limited amount of games. I'm probably going to hedge my bets a bit and say I have him bordering on the low and mid. That's where I'm at.
It was a solid mid tier.
Yeah, so I was going to say probably
a name that I'm familiar with, but not as like a standout best. But
yeah,
he's somebody that I am familiar with. Merton Hanks doesn't, man. It's weird looking at a guy who's got a first team on there and going, he's borderline bottom and mid tier for me. I'm kind of leaning towards bottom, but I have a feeling you're going to come in and bump him up to at least mid tier.
He's kind of, we have kind of opposite thoughts. Like you have with Kermit is what I have with Merton Hanks. I remember
that was my feeling when I was saying it.
Yeah, he was their number one for many years outside of really 1 year because they had Deion Sanders. He also has, look at that neck. That is such a huge neck, just in terms of length. I remember him always.
Were able to fit his number and his forehead in one picture.
Right. It was tough. It was tough to find one. But I remember another thing I remember for him was a couple of pick sixes or whatever. As he's running in the end zone, he used to flail his head around. It was hilarious. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But overall, legitimately, he was a really good corner. So he's a solid mid tier. So kind of that opposite route with Curtin Alexander. So what you got on Dwight?
Oh, you want me to take Dwight?
Oh, I'm sorry. It is my turn. Dwight Hicks, 4-time Pro Bowler in 6 seasons, 96 games, 30 picks, 4 TDs. Another guy I have a bit of struggle with because stats aren't as good as Kermit Alexander, so I have him a little bit back, but he has 4 touchdowns, which is really good as a defensive back. 4-time Pro Bowler. I'm back and forth with him between the bottom and mid tier.
Your pitchers confuse me.
You would think the guy from the 60s would be black and white, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at it like it gives me a headache looking back at a guy who played a decade earlier. He ended his career a decade earlier, and his pitchers in color. I don't know what's going on. I think you made a mistake. Therefore, he's a mid-tier.
Jimmy Johnson, not the coach.
Johnson.
Not the coach.
What do you mean, not the coach? He's in the Hall of Fame for his coaching with the Cowboys, is he not?
I mean, that is Jimmy Johnson definitely is in the Hall of Fame for coaching with the Cowboys. Yes.
Well, then he's a top gold tier. What are you What are you saying? This isn't the same guy? He didn't retire from the 49ers and then coach the Cowboys to Super Bowls?
Surprisingly, no.
I still refuse to believe that. He's top tier. Fuck you.
Oh, he's top tier either way. Fuck you too. Speaking of gold tiers, we talked about Ronnie Lott a bit in the face of the franchise as such, and Ronnie Lott was just an absolute beast. My favorite story of him is he literally ripped off part of his finger on the field. That's just kind of the guy Ronnie Lott was. He did not want to go in the middle field with Ronnie Lott. Probably wouldn't be playing in this day and age, unfortunately. Not his style isn't really conducive to the rule set, but Ronnie Lott was a beast.
And speaking of beast, we have 1 year player, 14 games, gold tier. Why? Prime time.
Yeah,
I'm never gonna see Deion Sanders and not have him as a top tier. I don't care if he showed up for their training camp and that was it.
Well, we're gonna have fun with the Ravens then.
Gold tier.
He played like 3 years after he retired and came back at 37.
Gold tier. I don't even know what our tiers are. There's not. It's gonna be black, silver, and purple. Gold tier.
Yeah, Deion Sanders, mercenary work at its finest in the late mid-90s. 1 year Super Bowl champion, probably had his best season. I think he won Defensive Player of the Year that year as well. Normally 10-year makes some difference. We wouldn't normally consider that, but I think this is probably his best year of his career, of someone like you said, the greatest DB of all time. And yeah, he's number one.
Well, I wouldn't put him at
not number one. Number one all time.
Is my first selection.
Yeah, not number one on this team, but number one overall is what I meant for the DB. Yeah, Ronnie Lott is number one here. I think it'd be a bit disrespectful of Jimmy Johnson not to put him at 2 because he had the 10-year, 4 All-Pros, 5-time Pro Bowler, but Deion's number 3.
Yeah, he's our last gold tier. Then we have 3 at the mid tier here.
I struggle separating these. I think name wise, I think Merton Hanks would be 4 for me over Hicks and Alexander. I feel like it's opposite for you.
Opposite for me. It's Kermit, Hicks, Hanks.
Mm-hmm. This is a bit of a tough call. Merton Hanks does have more games played, so he was more healthier than Dwight Hicks. Dwight Hicks played in 16-game seasons, so that's something to consider as well. Merton Hanks did play 8 total years compared to 6 for Dwight Hicks, so maybe not as much as I think for. But Dwight Hicks does have the interception the games played and also has 4 touchdowns as well. Kermit Alexander played in the 60s, 36 picks in less game. Oh man, it's tough. I don't have a 4th really picked out.
Well,
like I said,
either way, Hicks is out because he's your number 2. He's my number 2. We both have Kermit and Merton Hanks. One of us has him at a 1. Are we shooting for it?
So this is going to be a little weird. Kermit Alexander played with Jimmy Johnson his entire career, so he was never the number 1 guy. Merton Hanks was the number 1 guy for all but 1 year, because obviously they went completely mercenary mode, and that 94 San Francisco team might have been the greatest team ever assembled. So that's where I'm at with Merton Hanks. So we might end up having to shoot 2.
Well, again, too, if you're going to say he was the number 1, Kermit Alexander was the number 2 and still ended up with 36 picks.
Yeah, he ended up with 10 picks. Absolutely. We're shooting.
Okay.
Shoot two. Not too often we double shoot in one video. I think we've done it once before, I feel like.
Yep.
All right. You went evens last time, so I will go evens this time.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3, shoot.
1-0.
1, 2, 3, shoot.
Evens. Or 1-1, I mean. Or even is what I meant to say.
1, 2, 3, shoot.
2-1 you.
1, 2, 3, shoot.
All right. Game 5. Who's going to clutch it out?
1, 2, 3, shoot.
Damn. I went against myself. I'm like, I think he's going 1 here. Damn it. All right. Fair enough.
We've been streaky, so hopefully that we continue with that, because I won a bunch and then you won a bunch, and hopefully I've swung it back around and I can start winning some of those again.
Oh, I got the important ones. All joking aside. So
Merton Hanks is heading over into the Alt D. I think that's going to be the end of the list, though, because I have one name on there where I'm like, he better be going.
Yeah. Our DBs are Ronnie Lott, Jimmy Johnson, Neon Deion Sanders, and Kermit Alexander.
Kermit Alexander, our first non-top tier player to make it.
We made it all the way to the DB. Not bad.
So now we need to look at Cedric Hardman, Charlie Kruger, Ken Norton, Navarro Bowman, and Merton Hanks. Whose tier would you like to change?
Okay. So let's get. I'm assuming that Ken Norton's the guy you were saying that has to be.
Ken Norton's my guy. Yeah.
Let's put him up and get that done. So I'm between Hardman and Kruger ultimately with this final spot. So I would bring Bowman down. I think I would bring both of them up, or we could keep it at the red tier. It doesn't really matter a whole lot. I think Merton Hanks is the first one to go fairly easily here.
Okay. So we're at Kruger and Hardman.
And I like Bowman. I just don't. His games play just isn't there enough for me. His first team All Pros are, but it's you got to make that kind of decision. So I'm between Hardman and Kruger. Kruger has different era, 198 games played. Hardman had 100 plus sacks, which is just not something that's done by everybody, and I think that's something that some people fail to realize. I lean towards the erection.
Okay, this is where I'm at. I know the name Charlie Kruger more than Cedric Erection, and I like name recognition more. But as we've been talking about this and looking at the stats more, I've switched. So if you're hedging at all on your pick of the Erection over Freddy Krueger, I have switched to give you a little bit more support.
Okay.
I'm at Erection going up.
I'm at Hardman.
Again, just looking at it, it's over 100 sacks in fewer games.
And 10 a season, basically, because he played 10 years ultimately.
So those are big, and it is hard to ignore. So even though I know the name Charlie Kruger more, won me over with the stats. So Ken Norton Jr.'s Erection.
Now we'll finish up here. We'll talk about our lineups. We'll start here on the offensive side of the ball with our starting quarterback, Joe Montana, having a running back core of Roger Craig and Joe Perry, throwing the ball to, obviously, Jerry Rice, Gene Washington, and Terrell Owens, with George Kittle as his tight end. Man, he would have loved having George Kittle. And he's had a good one back in this day, too. And we have, backing up the quarterback, we have the great Steve Young, Colin Kaepernick, and running back Frank Gore, and backup tight end Vernon Davis, which I think this is the first time we had backup tight end.
Yeah.
So this is a damn good offense.
So we have 3 wide, 2 tight ends, a damn good receiving back, 2 heavy halfbacks, couple guys to throw the ball, and a guy to just fucking lead by example.
Mhm.
Predictions for this offense.
One at the top. It's going to be in the running for top.
He's
two.
got they're good, battling for the best.
Yeah.
Defensive lineup. We have Ronnie Lott, Jimmy Johnson, primetime Deion Sanders, Kermit Alexander as our defensive backs. We have Patrick Willis, Dave Wilcox, Charles Haley, and Ken Norton Jr. as our linebackers, Bryant Young, Justin Smith, Cedric Hardman as our defensive line in a 3-4 defense. Quite a bit different from our 2-5 that we had from our
Cowboys game. Yeah. Where do you think this defense is going to be?
Average, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be quite to the good range, because I think the defensive line brings it down a bit compared to some of the defensive line we've seen. I think the linebacking core is fucking great. And
Ken Norton, putting him in boosts this significantly for me.
Yeah. I'm with you. I think it's going to be between average and above average. I think they're going to be on that line, most likely.
Again, the name recognition with Kermit for me, but again, I didn't think of him as like
all-time
standing all-time guy. But he had more recognition. He said he's the number 2 to Jimmy Johnson, but I think of Kermit before Jimmy Johnson. Jimmy Johnson's in the Hall of Fame, so take that for what it is with me.
Right.
But Deion and Ronnie Lott, holy fuck.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think as a team, now we're talking. The reason why I think ultimately they may not be quite to the top tier, I think they might not be fighting for it, is I think if we're talking about an average, just slightly above average defense, I think that's going to keep them away from that very top. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the second good tier.
I think they have the potential to drop down into the above average.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it'll happen, but it has that potential.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, but it's going to be really hard to put a team with Joe Montana and Steve Young, Jerry Rice into above average. We are done with the San Francisco 49ers. 9, 10, 11, 12. That is 12 teams done.
That'll do it here for this all-time team. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, deuces.